Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to more than likely the final episode of Know Your Unit, today about dragons. So, dragons are a very versatile and very easy to get unit, something that basically doesn't take any setup to be able to work at full efficiency. So let's go ahead and get started here. First and foremost, random bit of an odd note here. If for the one guy that was asking if you could use Seals of Rebirth or Rings of the Dead or Book of the Dead or whatever else on a dragon, they can use a Charm of Remission to get out of being a zombie. The other stuff, no, it doesn't work on them. I don't know why it would, but hey, you were curious, so there you go. Alright, so let's go over their skills to begin with, because every dragon, and there's 9 flavors of them, is going to more or less have the same skills, minus their breath move that's going to be different. Okay, so starting off with Constitution, it's going to give them a pretty meaty health bar, simply on account of, they already have a ton of HP being a heavy unit. So especially in their hands, Constitution can potentially be very deadly. So one thing I want to point out is that you'll notice several of these dragon types are going to have a particular breath move that they use. Certain dragon types, I would recommend just swapping this out for Constitution. Like, realistically, there's only a couple of enemies in the game that you need something like Misstep for, and even then it's situational. And in those cases, you probably just want extra health on them. So just so you know, they don't always need their breath move, it's just another tool in their arsenal. They have plenty of stuff without it. So, anyway, so we have this to give them additional health. We have Pincer Attack to give them additional attacks. Typically, you'll stop using Pincer around Chapter 4. In the post-game, it's not exactly that good unless you completely stat dump a dragon. Just because their basic attacks have a harder time keeping up. Their other stuff still works fine, it's just their basic attacks that have a bit of a drop-off there. Steadfast is going to be almost mandatory in several sections of the game to make sure that they don't get shield bashed off a ledge with their otherwise immortal self. Then you've got Rampart Aura. Probably wouldn't run this too often. As always, it's here for area denial. It's really useful in the case of undead dragons. So, like, let's say you turn a dragon undead, you let them get knocked out, you give them some Steadfast, you give them a Rampart Aura, and you give them their reflective scales. You basically just have a free damage barricade. Anyway. Siege, their movement is already kind of iffy to begin with. They can't expand their natural movement. Please don't reduce them down to 3. Don't do this to your best lizard boy over here. Just don't give them Siege. Okay, Petrify and Charm here for obvious reasons, though. Petrify is useful against Giga Chickens later on down the line, because while their dragon scales will absorb the damage of those things, they still can't resist the petrification. So if you can give them the ability to resist it, this will help. Alright, next up, let's talk about their universal abilities. So Tail Lash is going to be a cheap 2-tile move that'll hit reasonably hard, generally pretty good at bypassing defenses. It's only going to be single target, but it is able to bypass many obstacles, so that's kind of its use case there. Just like if there's a bush or something in the way, if there's a barricade in the way, just go ahead and slap it with a tail. Anyways, then we have Toxic Breath, which every one of them will be able to use. This has a chance to leaden, so every dragon type will still have the ability to leaden on hit. So if, for example, you wanted to make sure that units weren't flying, you can guarantee leaden. They're actually one of the only ways to guarantee leaden through their Breath and Dragon's Eye. So, actually, let's cover that real quick. Dragon's Eye is going to be one of their automatic abilities that will give them the ability to have 100% hit on their attacks. Now, this includes their breath attack, which is, again, why we're able to guarantee stuff like leaden here. So leaden is, again, going to prevent stuff from flying, prevent stuff from dodging, and keep it from moving more than 1 tile away. This also means that this is a really good stranding move, so it's really handy that all dragon types have it. So if you ever, for example, ran into a situation where you're fighting a bunch of earth units and you're like, oh shoot, my typical dragon here is lightning, I don't want them taking that extra damage, but Misstep sucks, well, then you still can switch them into an air dragon and still have them run this Toxic Breath, because again, they will all have that Toxic Breath. So, great tool there. Then we're going to skip their specific breath for just a moment here to go over the other ones. So they will have a resonance of their particular element. This is really good if you're also using archers. So archers and fusiliers next to somebody with a resonance, actually dragoons as well. There's not too many abilities out there that'll end up giving you those free instills and stuff like that. So adding this to units that otherwise wouldn't be able to use it can give you a really big benefit. A bit situational, but again, if you are running a lot of units that specifically are looking to go kind of hit stuff with like a single big physical attack, again like archers for example, those instills can absolutely pay dividends. So just something to consider, that they are an effective tank support in that situation as well. Just put them in front with their Rampart Aura, put up their Blazing Resonance, and there you go. Suddenly they're providing a lot of extra damage. They don't need to be doing it themselves, and they can be throwing rocks in the meantime to just knock stuff around. Now, I don't know the exact numbers. Currently, actually, a bit of an exciting development is that a lot of the internal numbers of the game have finally been cracked after all this time. So Gib discovered all that stuff, and it sounds like Recession is going and assisting. So either way, I saw that Rakes was digging into it as well. So they're all going and doing their thing. So hopefully we'll get a lot of fun discoveries out of that. Anyway, so yeah, as far as Instill goes, great tool to have on hand. Next up, we're going to have Dash here, so that's just going to give him 3 extra tiles of range. Very useful in combination with something like Rampart Aura, as it allows them to really position themselves well. Again, depends on the map though, but they do get the ability to put their movement up to 7, and that's great. Dragon's Eye for guaranteeing the effect on their breath move, and then additionally Dragon Scale, possibly one of the most busted moves in the game. So this is an automatic. A lot of their strength comes from automatics, and automatic cards are very easy to come by. So essentially what Dragon Scale does is it reflects damage back at the attacker. Now the thing is, they also reduce 80% of that attack when it's going and hitting them. And then they reflect whatever they are hit for onto the other guy. This means that they can effectively HP tank just about anything. So unless they are petrified or put to sleep or something like that, which not many units are able to actually do, they effectively can just be put up in the front and sent to go deal with just about anything. They can more or less stall out almost any unit in the game. So very, very, very effective tool in that regard. In fact, I've seen... You see a lot of weird hot take Reddit posts, but there was one in particular of a guy saying that this was the optimal way to play the game, and there's clearly no reason to do anything else. Like, man, you see a lack of creativity sometimes, but hot damn. Anyway, so let's go ahead and continue on. So every dragon will also have its own unique breath move, give or take unique. It's unique to their element. Many of these are extremely diabolical in how useful they can be. Some of them are just stick with the leaden breath, okay? So the three most useful in most situations are going to be your Fire Dragon, which will give you a weaken effect, your Water Dragon, which will give you a breach effect, and your, here, so let's just go over to this real quick. So your Water Dragons will give you a breach effect, so like Water's really good if you're running a lot of ranged units, Fire is really good for damage mitigation, because that weaken effect will, again, work on everything, so it'll reduce the incoming offense of anything physical dramatically. In fact, using this on several of the Archer bosses, if you can, for example, use Dragon's Eye as well as their cheap Fire Breath, as well as Dash to actually get them into position, you can potentially see some of them doing single digits in some cases. Not all the Archer bosses, but still, it's really, really helpful against those. And then False Strike. If, for example, you're running into issues with Knight Commanders or whatever else, False Strike is going to be a really solid way to get rid of that. False Strike plus Dodge means that you have a 40% chance to just completely mitigate their finishers and things like that, so really solid tool there. If you're running a lot of summoners and things, you're probably going to want to keep the Dark Dragon in mind, as it inflicts Enfeeble. So one thing I want to mention before continuing on with their breath moves is that they have 2 different flavors of breath move. They have their cheap breath move and they have their AoE breath move. So their cheap breath move is going to be able to be sustained very easily. They can basically just fire their breath in short bursts for a 2-tile area. Meanwhile, Flame Breath 2 is going to hit a 5-tile area in a kind of ranged explosion. Now, yes, you do. It is technically more efficient in the long term. You technically get way more value out of Flame Breath 2, but Flame Breath 1, the sheer sustainability factor of only costing 35, don't underestimate that. because that is oftentimes enough to the point where if you put them in the front, they get hit, they throw out a counterattack. Oftentimes they'll be able to fund this 35 MP. Flame Breath 2, you may occasionally get more downtime. So either way, you're not always going to have 5 targets bunched up. You will usually have 2 units next to each other. So just kind of something for your consideration, just so you're aware. I know personally, I typically will run the Breath 1. Between the two, there's a slight damage bump for Breath 2, but either way, you're mostly using them for the purpose of their debuff anyway. Okay, so that being said, these 3 I would argue are probably the most useful if you're running a lot of casters, especially multi-hit casters. The Enfeeble effect off the Dark Dragon is going to help you out more. The Arc Dragon is going to be really useful in cases where there's boss units with a lot of spells, as it allows them to miss. So it's essentially False Strike for wizards. They've got Spoil Spell. You've got Misstep on the Cloud Dragon. It's so situational you'll almost never use it. The one case where a misstep might be useful is in the case of something like setting up for a poison ninja for your overleveled Giga units if you're approaching there early. Like if you're doing the whole thing of trying to collect your early relics off of those level 50s, then you might want to use a misstep in order to then get those poison arrows to land easier. It's ultra situational, but technically a tool in your belt. Earth Dragon comes up so little, I constantly get the Earth and Ice ones confused, so let's go ahead and take a look. What are you guys running these days? Stagger, you also probably will never be using this. There's maybe some bosses that has a use against, but mostly you're using them for their elemental resistance. And then for the Ice Dragon, what are you doing exactly? You doing anything fun? False Flight? Yeah, you're never going to use this either. Maybe against some of the Archer bosses, but like I figure if you're hitting them with False Flight, you can also hit them with Weaken. Weaken just completely annihilates their ability to do damage. False Flight gives them a 20% chance to miss. I mean, I guess go for both if you got them. A lot of times I personally would recommend running dragons in pairs, so that you can kind of have them up like the rooks on both sides, you know? So useful stuff there. And then finally, the last flavor is going to be the Hydra, which is going to come with all of the standard stuff as before. However, their breath is poison. So between all of these, you now have a very, very durable unit. That's incredibly tanky, can potentially be zombified if that's what you're looking for. They've got great debuffs on their moves. They've got great options to be all sorts of different roles. Again, if you're just looking for a way to shut down flyers before they become the problem, consider simply using something like a sort of I guess like a hunter-killer variant here, where you go for the dash, you go for the Dragon's Eye, you go for the cheap toxic breath. You keep the scale on there for defensive purposes, and then from there you're going and shutting stuff down and preventing it from flying. Maybe you want to use the Frost Breath to get a bit more of an elemental bonus. You know, maybe get rid of some archers or whatnot. I guess technically the False Flight effect is also somewhat useful on things like endgame cockatrices and things, just because a lot of those monster units will have ranged counterattacks. So if you give them a chance to miss, that's potentially some decent damage mitigation. So there's that. I know personally the lightning, fire, and water trifecta is my personal favorite, but you know, you do you. I know a lot of folks swear by having those dark dragons in their summoner teams, so you know, great tool there. So yeah, that's the dragon. I mean, there's not really anything too special to say about them. They can move and hunt stuff if you want them to. If you want them to actually go fly like their little wings want to, you can go ahead and put flight rings on there. A lot of accessories benefit them particularly well, and something like fire and water dragons, just to point this out, will have different movement properties to them. So, for example, if you wanted to not have your units bunched up as much during the Nibeth Volcano fight, you can go ahead and put some fire dragons in there, and they can just go stand on the lava. It also means that they basically have free access to the flanks to go completely annihilate stuff. So even if you were just using the Leaden move to prevent their units from moving around or whatever else, basically they can absolutely tear through the place with breath moves. Additionally, if you wanted to have any of them walk on any type of terrain whatsoever, obviously movement rings still apply to them. That being said, you should probably focus on giving them the ones with the crush bonus and stuff like that. Anyway, that all being said, that's the dragon for you. It's not super complicated. They're easy to get in gigantic numbers, just going into Farumpa. Remember, they are just right here. You can zombify them if you want to, and if you run into any zombie dragons in the wild, you can just use Tame on them just like you would a regular dragon, because they are still a dragon, and presumably you're just giving them fish or something. I don't know. Anyway, so that is about that. So y'all have yourselves a good one. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will see you now that we're starting with Know Your Unit 1 Vision, hopefully in the next part here. So, alright, I'll see you then. Take care.